welcome everybody. I am looking at some of the best creative and talented writers and graphic designers in the fandom that we call wikiDeeks. Welcome to our last and final roundtable for the site. I know it's sad, but all good things come to an end, and we want to gather together for this great show and why we're going to miss our favorite character, Marty Deeks, and talk about a little bit about what made him so special over the last 14 years. And of course, we wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for, we wouldn't have been doing this for over 10 years if we hadn't found the show and found the characters, that we've all grown to love. So I'd like to introduce everybody to our viewers so you all know who is here on the site during the roundtable. Karen, our editor, has written many features and reviews. And Lindy, who's also Sweet Lou, is our fanfic editor. She's written many great Deek-centric fanfics and designed much of our art for our pieces. Some other fanfic writers that we have on board are M. She writes our Drabble, as well as some really great one-off fanfics. And Pat has also contributed to our fanfics as well. So we love our fanfic writers. There's Lisa, who writes our previews and has also given us a lot of our edits that we use for the different reviews. Gail's contributed. Gail, who is also Denziland, has also contributed in many areas: previews, surflog, video collages, feature stories. Have I missed anything, Gail? She's been here from the beginning. Brenda has written reviews and feature stories for our site. Randy, aka Jericho Steele, has written reviews and some wonderful fanfics for us as well. Missing, unfortunately, is Colleen, or Deeks Freak, who is our Jedi webmaster and graphic designer, but she is, I'm sorry, I missed Donna, but I'll get to you, Donna. But Deeks Freak, or Colleen, she'll be, she's at a family reunion, so she couldn't be with us. And finally, Donna, who has written all of our Kenzie journals over the last couple of years. And so we appreciate everybody here. Oh, and by the way, I'm Diane. About 14 years ago, a few of us met at a conference, and an NCIS conference, and we decided that Deeks was poorly underrated in terms of being singled out, for one of the best characters on the show. So we decided that we were going to put together a website, and that's how wikiDeeks came together. And it's been a blast. I've enjoyed working with all of you. We've had over 25 contributors over the past 14 years that have worked on the site, and I've loved everyone, and I couldn't have done it without you. So I really appreciate you all being here and sharing this roundtable with everybody. Just to let you know, we're going to keep wikiDeeks and our Instagram open and begin to cover some of our career endeavors, so you can still come into the site and go through our archives if you're still interested in what Eric is doing, so you can check that out. We have a lot of new fans that come on board all the time. They just discover the show and they're starting to look for things about Deeks, and it's great to hear from them, and that they're want to find out what we've covered over the last at least 10 years. So we're happy to be sticking around, and who knows, maybe we'll see a Deek sighting sometime in the future that we can report. You never know. So, okay, so are we ready to start here, guys? All right. Let's talk about the finale. How did you feel about those last 2 episodes? Let's start there. Just anybody, just start talking. As I wrote, yeah, anybody, and that's you, Randy.
I was waiting. I was being polite. Well, I missed the last 2 seasons. I'd missed most of it for various reasons, but I took some time yesterday, watched the finale, and I guess for wrapping up the series, it did a pretty good job, because I know it's hard to wrap up a series without, either killing everybody off or ending the world. but I thought they did a pretty good job. I still miss Linda. I miss Linda so much because she was one of the things that drove me to the show when it first started. I've always loved her as an actress, loved the character she's played, and I just missed her so much. And again, it was they did a cameo without doing a cameo. I guess you can do that with Nell stepping into her shoes. So it was bittersweet, but it was had enough humor, enough bangs going on, enough of a fairly decent case for them to work together as the last case we would see them work together without ending the team, which was, I thought it would kind of surprise me. I thought they would, end the team like some shows like this, they split them up. They send Sam to San Diego or send Callan to Washington but they didn't do that. So it was just, now we're free to continue to play those scenarios out in our heads. I thought it was pretty good.
That's exactly what I liked, is that it felt like it wasn't an end. It was just an end of what we get to see of them. But they continue on, and the stories continue on, and the adventures continue on. We just don't get the front row seat anymore. And I really like that, because you don't have, there's not that same sense of mourning. There's the loss of the show, but they're all out there happy and they're living their lives.
Plus, I think it kind of leaves the door open for like a Criminal Minds-esque kind of return potentially in a year or two, which would be just lovely.
Or Sam on NCIS Hawaii, which I wasn't aware that he was going to pop up on there. So when I saw him, when I watched the finale there, I was like, oh, well, that would be cool. I mean, not as good as Deeks showing up there, but yeah.
Yeah.
But hopefully that does leave the door open for him or any of the other characters to also do the same, depending on schedules. The one thing, like, I saw a post that said something about, like, they had dates like slated for him to come in, and it's like July and September, which I'm sure is due like to LL Cool J's tour. But if the writer's strike keeps going, those aren't going to line up anymore, and that might not happen. So maybe it'll leave the door open and somebody else will pop in instead if he's not available.
Mm-hmm.
This is Lindy. I watched the last episode, and I felt like the open-ended nature of the ending was just perfect for me. I didn't want it to end like someone just said about sending them different places. It's like it's still going on. We just can't see it, but we can imagine it and enjoy it. And of course, we'd all like to have seen Deeks with a baby and Kinsey, but I think that the idea that they're out there still looking for Hetty kind of makes sense to me. I was happy. I kind of anticipated that they would have Kinsey become pregnant at the end. I don't think that was a surprise to most of us who've watched it so long. So that was perfect for them. It's always bittersweet when this happens, when you lose something that we've all watched for 14 seasons. And I'm still grappling with that. I know we were supposed to write fanfics about what happens next, and I find myself unable to do that at the moment because it's so difficult to put them somewhere else, but eventually I guess I will. But I'm just still sad from losing all these wonderful people, and especially Deeks. I mean, he's been a part of what's kept me writing for 12 years, 13 years actually. And I'll miss seeing him evolve even further. So it's a bittersweet end, but all good things, I guess, do come to an end at some point. It's been a pleasure to work with all of you, and it's a pleasure to see all of you finally. What would be helpful to me is if you can say your name before you start talking so I can kind of connect everything together. I'd appreciate that. That's it for me.
Good idea. Anybody else about the finale?
Echoing what others said, I too was afraid. Actually, I was envisioning that they were all gonna have beers in the bullpen, where unfortunately I am not at right now. And that they were gonna just walk out the door and shut off the lights and that was gonna be it. So this was incredibly surprising and refreshing. And I'd sort of gotten some inklings of things before I had the opportunity, because I was delayed in watching the show this week. And so knowing where the storyline was going with Deeks and Kinsey, I was like, okay, I know what's going to happen. This isn't surprising. And still, I found myself with like tears running down my face. Unabashedly, I'm very happy about that.
And that was Gail.
This is Pat, AKA Amusement. And yeah, I agree with what everyone has said. I thought that Eric and Daniela did a masterful job with that scene of finding out that she's pregnant, even though we all already knew last week before she was probably pregnant. They just did a great job with that. Yeah, and I think it's hard for the writers to figure out, does Kenzie work through her pregnancy? Does she stop through her pregnancy? So I think it was inevitable that it had to be in the last show because they don't have to write it after that. One of the other things I appreciated this about it, and this is actually an appreciation of the whole of the show, is bringing in the other characters that we had met with along the way at the very end. So Nate and Sabatino, and I don't know who else was there, but because I think this show, better than most, has made use of a recurring cast of guest characters that are familiar and likable or unlikable, but you know them and they kind of fit well with the regular cast. And I was glad to see them all again at the end.
This is Karen. I think echoing what Gail said, that scene where they find out they're pregnant was so beautiful. And I just keep going back to the one shot at the end of that scene where Deeks has his arms wrapped around Rosa and Kenzie, and he just, at that point, he literally has everything he's ever wanted in his arms. And that just made me so happy to see him get exactly what he's always wanted.
This is Lissa. For me, I definitely wasn't disappointed with what we got. As with a lot of things in recent years, I wish we would have gotten more. But given that they made the announcement and that episode was likely already written and they kind of just like tacked onto it with that additional episode, like if we had had a 24 episode season, we probably could have gotten a lot more of a conclusion. But since we only had the 21 episodes, it was just that much shorter. It's like, could we have had a couple more, please? But I wasn't disappointed with what we got. It wasn't one of those season finales that make me literally throw the show away like How I Met Your Mother did. You know, it wasn't one of those. So it is definitely still bittersweet, but I'm not unhappy with how it ended.
Going off what Lissa said, I also wasn't unhappy with the finale. I just, as she said, wish there was more of it, maybe a little bit more interaction between the main four. I felt like that was kind of missing. I do like the open-endedness of it, but I needed like more of an ending scene where they were all together just for us, because we don't know if they'll ever all be together in a show again. So I don't know, I kind of needed that to, just be that final moment between all of them, and as well as other things, but that was one thing that was kind of missing for me.
This is Lindy again. Did anybody get the feeling that they might do, I don't know, a limited series thing, maybe on streaming, of them going after Hetty and bringing them all together again? I mean, it seemed so open-ended and kind of tantalizing there at the end, that you kind of wonder if they weren't leaving the door open for some other adventure that could come.
Yeah, it's a possibility. I mean, they could always do a one-off type thing. Or they can get together with some of the other two shows to, I don't know, somehow expand what has happened in the LA universe.
I wonder, this is Brenda. I wondered that too. When Sam was in the finale of Hawaii, he said he was in Venezuela on his way from Morocco. So they did reference that. So, but yeah, just back to the scene that Karen was talking about. That was such perfection, wasn't it? Like he's got everything there. He's got the family that he never had before and that he's always wanted. I missed a lot of the last, not this past season, but the prior 2 seasons, just with the pandemic, working in an ER, I was getting more than enough adrenaline at work. I didn't need any booms or bangs in my life on TV. So I kind of didn't connect with Roundtree and Fatima all that much because I missed a lot of the episodes where they were. So I was a little bit disappointed for the time that they got in the finale. I felt like maybe it would have been nice for some of us longer term people to have more of the main characters. I loved seeing Sabatino and Nate and Nell. That was fantastic, and referencing what Eric was up to. And I also have to confess, I always loved Arcady. And the fact that Talon ends up with Arcady as his father-in-law, I mean, that is just like, I feel like it's funny, it's beautiful, and there's maybe just a little bit of karma involved there. So I thought that was really fantastic. I mean, I was like Gail, I was crying through that whole thing. I think I had to pause it a couple of times just to compose myself. But that was a great chuckle for me, seeing that Talon's gonna have to deal with Arcady for the rest of Arcady's life. That was
What happens if Deeks has to deal with Arcady the rest of his life too?
and Callan and Deeks end up as brother-in-laws. That'd be fantastic.
Oh my God, yeah. I can't imagine him having to tell his mom that Kenzie's pregnant. She's going to go bonkers.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like I agree with, I can't remember who said that it would have been very difficult to manage a pregnancy during the run of the series, because how would she have been able to work, right? But doing it like this, that you miss seeing those kinds of reactions. It would have been nice to have that, like with one more episode, seeing how she reacted and whatnot.
Yeah, they made such a big deal out of it too. Whenever the pregnancy talk began, that this was when they would leave, not just her, but both of them. She said, well, I wouldn't work here if we had a kid, so they really kind of painted themselves into a corner with that, because unless you're going to let Rosa and Mama Deeks raise the child, one of them or both of them are going to want to be home and, in a safe job where they can come home and, do the recitals and help with the homework and go to the base, the softball game. So I really do think that if they do come back, for a limited run, it'll have to be either, they're coming back short term because of Hetty again, or, it's a few years down the road where, little Deeks is in kindergarten and, they can, spare some time during the day and, that sort of thing.
Do you think they'll stay with the agency? Do you think they might maybe go into different types of roles, like maybe instructors or, that type of deal? Because I can't see I can't see Kenzie behind a desk, but I can see her with agents doing something.
Yeah, I would think so. I mean, I've written, a couple of different post sort of things, and that's always been one of my favorites, is her doing the two of them. Even I think I wrote one where they were both working with like a local flexi sort of thing, because I can both see them wanting to keep their hands in and working together. I can also see him, going the JAG route. He's a lawyer. Why can't he do something like that? To kind of keep his foot in, or they could do something completely different. I also anticipate, think about working in like a homeless shelter or a battered woman shelter or something like that, where they can be a little bit more regular, but still be, keeping their hands in the helping professions. A lot of things they could do.
Mhm. Anybody else want to talk about the finale? Any other comments? Go, Gail.
Yes, it is Gail. I will say there was one moment that I about came out of my chair because it was such a missed opportunity, was when Deeks was trying to distract for Kenzie's benefit at the gate with the pretend dog, right? And the dog's name in this episode is Bubblegum. And I am literally screaming at the TV. The dog's name was supposed to be Biscuit.
Biscuit.
Because if you went back to when Deeks first joined the team and they were out on this case, and everybody is talking about the biscuit, and Deeks has no idea what they're talking about because he's new to the team. If
Yeah.
they had made that connection, like, it would have just made it so much richer. So I don't know who dropped the ball, but I'm really annoyed with that.
Yeah, I
Well,
can.
it was actually, this time it was a snake. So I'm thinking that was why the name changed, but it would have been nice to connect it to the throwback, because I had the same thought.
Yeah.
I actually yelled out Biscuit when he started that monologue there. I didn't really care for that too much. I know they were trying to show the funky, weird Deeks, but I thought it was a little weird, and why it was a snake, I don't know that either, but anyway.
Hmm.
I yelled Biscuit at the TV at the same time.
It
I
can
kind
be
of-
the new wikiDeeks code word moving forward for all of us.
There you go.
Biscuit.
I was kind of wishing it was like a 90-minute finale so that maybe they could do just 15 minutes of Deeks M, you know? Just 15 minutes, give us 15 minutes, especially at this time when, he's finding his way in life and he's getting what he wants. It would have been so nice to kind of like back, but okay.
I can't believe it's Brenda again. I can't believe the end of the series without us ever getting that episode. I mean,
And we
that's
tried. Oh, Lord, how we tried.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But
And every time we tried, Gemmel just said, let's just change Callan's story instead.
yeah. All right. Well, speaking of the journey, how did you feel about Deke's journey from his first appearance to his last? Let's talk about how he's worked his way through these 14 years or 13 years.
Well, this is Lindy again. I've started watching the earliest episodes I kept that I recorded through the seasons. And it made me so nostalgic for that time. Like, I just watched The Debt, and how still he was on the outside looking in kind of feeling. And it contrasted so sharply with kind of one of the guys and has been so included with everything now. But I'm still nostalgic for those old days. I still love the way he was so vulnerable and so trying his best to fit in and not really doing it. And I actually miss those days. I actually have loved going back and watching the old episodes because, we get to see once again, thank God for recordings, that, he was an incredible character that evolved over time. And it's been an amazing journey for him, for us to watch that happen, in Personal and Human Traffic and all those early ones. It's such a pleasure. And now I want to go back and relive it. And I look at my favorite episodes and realize, he became a big part of my life. I mean, he's the reason I started writing. And that's been a big part of my life. So, he's that character has really resonated with so many people. It's a shame to see that end. Although, you know, in our imagination, it hasn't, which is why I like the ending, because, you know, you can see them in your imagination going forward and doing what they do, living their lives. And, you know, at least we got to be a part of it for a brief moment in time.
Anybody else?
I mean, Lindy said a lot right there that I'm sure that many of us, sorry, this is Gail, are thinking about and already sort of walking down memory lane, even though we're so shortly out of the finale already. I think one of the things that you all made me think about was, yes, he's made this journey and he's part of the team and he's seen as a, you know, an equal and a leader and all of these things. In that moment, when you know Kinsey is about to tell him that he's going to be a dad, it was still that anticipation of not knowing what you were going to get. Was it going to be elation? Was it going to be like this outpouring of emotion? And or was it going to be, you know, is this a joke and unbelieving of what might be happening, still being able to keep us on our toes with that level of reaction really speaks to how rich and multifaceted the character has been.
The one thing about that one scene that I thought it was a throwback was when at the end, when he's left Rosa and Kinsey together and he says, I'm going to go call the doctor. He was one of those, is the shoe going to drop kind of thing. He still had that vulnerability of maybe this is a mistake. And he wanted to make sure it wasn't. And I thought that was a throwback for me for his earlier feelings about, you know, nothing good happens for me. So I thought that was very poignant.
This is Brenda. I think picking up on what Gail just said, that to me has always been one of the reasons why I like Deeks, and all of the characters have contributed in various ways, and they've grown and changed, and certainly Callan is a different person, and Sam and all of them. But out of the team, Deeks is the one that has had in my opinion, the most emotional range and the most. He's sort of more of a 3D character when it comes to his responses and his emotions. With Callan, you might not know exactly what you're going to get, but there's just like a narrower band of what you might expect of him and how he would react in a situation. And Deeks has just been a much more rich and multifaceted character, so you never really know what you're going to get, and not in a bad way. It's just like Gail said, sometimes, you know, is it going to be elation? Is it going to be joking? And I think that is partly the writing. And I always want to give credit to the writers because I think they do an amazing job. But I'm also convinced that it's part of how Eric has portrayed the character. I don't know that another actor would have done the same thing with that character and those lines, and the way that he embodied that writing gave us this rich three-dimensional character that has held our interest for so many seasons.
Yeah. Hi, it's Donna. I think the point, Brenda, that you just made about, you know, the writers, but it also being that part of Eric, because that scene when she revealed that he was pregnant, there were two moments there where I thought, is that written or was that Eric? You know, one was when, you know, she said, oh, you know, we have to keep this a secret because today's about Callan and Anna, and he goes, who? And, you know, and the other one was when he said something about the shawarma. Oh, it wasn't, it's a baby, it's not my shawarma, you know, or whatever it was. So you know, both of those, you know, a lot of times I find myself going, that had to have been just Eric, you know, and yeah, I mean, that's part of what really helps that, or just does make that character a lot more human, I think.
And he doesn't do it just with the dialogue. He also just does it with like the facial expressions and the way that he physically embodies the character, like exactly like that. Because you think, oh, did they write that? Did they tell him to do that? Or was that just, you know, how he's come to embody Deeks. Yeah.
I remember one time, I can't remember the name of the episode, but it's when Arlo Turk comes back in and they get in that big firefight where Turk leaves Deeks alone to fight off, I don't know how many shooters, like 3 or 4 shooters. And he comes to the end where he's got like just a knife and he's gonna fight these guys or whatever. And I can remember reading after that episode aired, I don't know if it was the writer or the director who said, I think it was the director, and I don't know who that was, but he told Eric, he said, I need you to give me a moment when he knows he could be killed. He said, I need you to give me a moment. And that's all he had to tell Eric. And that's what we got. We got that freeze frame of him and all this emotion just crossed his face. It just, you could just see all of the things that were going through his mind with not a word spoken. And that to me is the genius of Eric Christian Olsen's acting abilities. I mean, it was perfect.
Anybody else want to talk about what makes the character so special and why we devoted a whole website to this man?
This is Pat, and for all the things that everyone has said so well about him, I think it is the writing and the actor, and I have to give credit to the directors and editors because we don't get to see his reactions if he's not on camera. So someone had to think about those things. But what I think caught me about Deeks, and Deeks is the reason I watched the show, although I grew to love all the characters. As shows get a little long in the tooth, sometimes things aren't as intriguing as they once were. So then it's specifically the one character that keeps me going. Deeks served as the everyman. He was the outsider, and he was us, because when he came into the unit, he had to understand how they worked, and they kind of had to explain a little bit about how they worked and reacted to the outsider as well. I'm not sure he was ever, aside from Kenzie, totally integrated in there. I think Callan especially maybe kept some distance from him. Not an antagonistic distance, but I think he didn't quite understand him. And maybe Sam got a little closer. But because they had such a strong relationship, those two, I don't think anybody was able to sort of penetrate that. So I see him as the underdog, the everyman, and he battles for the underdog, which is why when I wrote my end of show story, I sent him back to the police because I don't think he gets to do enough of that in NCIS, and I don't know that he would if they stayed in there. I don't know that he would want to be there without Kenzie. I think he might want to go back and help the underdog again. I could see him working in a youth shelter or something. But anyway, that's what caught my eye about him, and I think Eric has maintained that character throughout, so it hasn't morphed into somebody that we don't recognize by the end of the show. He's remained at core Deeks, and I think kudos to him for that, and I thank him for that.
I think, and I don't know if it's because he started out, this is Donna, because he started off as the outsider, or just because of who he is, that he also tended to be the conscience of the team more than others, or at least the one who would speak out and say, wait a minute, more than the others. I think, I'm sure there's multiple instances, but the one that I'm thinking of more recently, because I've seen it more recently, was when they were looking to find, oh my gosh, the guy who's in love with him. I can't think of his name right now. They were looking to find him and trade him with the Russians instead of Callan's father. And, they're like, look, I understand what we're going to do, but you need to realize whatever it is we're saving Callan's father from, that's exactly what we're sentencing him to. And, I know, like I said, he's done things like that on multiple occasions. So I think that that's also something else that really kind of stands out about his character.
The thing I think that's been so great about wikiDeeks is that we've been his defenders from the beginning. You know, whenever he's been made fun of or anything, we kind of come to his defense all the time. And I've really enjoyed that about wikiDeeks, the ability to do that, the desire to do that. And as he defended, I remember one of my favorite scenes was before they went to Mexico when he defended Callan against Mosley. And I still remember that. And I know we always said, well, why didn't anybody ever stand up for Deeks the way he stood up for Callan in that episode? And I thought that was what you were talking about there, is that, you know, he defends people. He's a defender of the people who are downtrodden and stuff. And I think your idea that he would go and after this and help people in homeless shelters or maybe child advocacy, I think that makes sense for his character, because I can't see him putting himself in danger when there's a child on the way. I can't see that happening.
This is Brenda. I think the other place where you have seen that a lot throughout the entire series is the way that he interacts with victims or victims' families, where they're doing the interviews and trying to get information. The sensitivity and the compassion that and the way that he talks and interacts. I've done some teaching at the university in breaking bad news and having those difficult conversations. And it really is exceptionally well done. And again, I think it's a combination of how it's written, but also how he interacts and the compassion and the sympathy that you can see on his face. And that, I think, comes from that place of having been the underdog and having known what it's like to be the outcast. And you know, I don't actually write fan fiction, but you know, in my imagination, you know, he had some heroes along the way, whether it was a teacher or a social worker or somebody who showed him that compassion and showed him how to be in his work dealing with victims. So I think that's another really significant part of the character and how he's taken that underdog and really is able to care for people who are in circumstances that maybe he was in at some point as a child.
I just had a thought. This is Donna. I just realized that I'm kind of grateful. A little bit of me is kind of grateful that maybe we didn't have the Deeks M episode, because I'm not trusting that after 13 years of Deeks on the screen that whatever writer would have taken that job on would have, and no offense to the writers, but would have done it as detailed as a fanfic writer might have, and with as much accuracy to the past and canon compliance as somebody writing fiction might have done or has done or have done. Because I think about even just the very brief mention between Kenzie and Jack leaving Kenzie on Christmas morning, and then the next time we see them, it's her having a conversation. Oh, when we broke up. That's two completely different things. And I kind of feel like that's a little bit of a risk there that might have been taken had we actually gotten a Deeks M, and we might have ended up much unhappier than we are now.
I think every long-running series should have a dedicated fan as a canon compliance officer.
Karen Peacock.
Yeah, it should have been Lissa.
Lissa, for sure.
Yeah.
Going back to what Brenda said about like Deeks' compassion and things, that's one of the things I always like notice like little moments of. Like he always makes a point, like when somebody has, given their story or, has been really scared and like done the thing, and he's like, he always is like, you did good. And that was definitely just always stood out to me. Like I always noticed that and I always appreciated that. And then there was that moment, I think in season 5 with the young woman who was a sex worker as well. And like, she's like, I got this job. It's legit. Like, I really need this job. And he like concocts this story so that he can take her in for questioning and not risk her job. He basically like just lied his ass off completely to the store owner so he could, you know, question this. And it just, things like that, just, that's what made me love the character. Just how he interacted, yeah, with just everybody. I mean, everybody was kind of treated like that. Like, even until like he confronted Sam in season 4, like he never had an issue with Sam. Like, he was obviously like brushed off and like was probably not happy with it, but he never let that change how he treated him. And I think that was kind of the case with everybody. Like, the only time it was like he was ever upset with somebody is if they wronged him. Like in that episode with Turk, where Turk left him to basically die. Like, that was the only time he was like, hey, like, dude, you don't do that. But other than that, like, unless you've really, really wronged him, like, he's compassionate with everyone. And that was just so, oh, I don't even know what the word I want, but it's what I wanted to see. And that's what grabbed me to him.
In addition to everything everyone else has said, one of the things that I really have always loved about Deeks is that he approaches things differently from the other characters. Sometimes as the show went on, I feel like the writers didn't always show that in the best light. Sometimes they, and maybe it was Eric as well, but they went a little too crazy with that. But he had a different type of intelligence, I think, sometimes, and just how he went into undercover roles and how he, even just when they're like undercover in a public space, I feel like usually he's the one that looks like he fits in the most. And just some of those little things that you see, he has a different understanding and different approach to how he does their job and understanding how to fit in with people that some of the other characters, especially early on, don't seem to have. And that's one of the things that he has so many skills. He was a lawyer, all those things. That was one of the things that made me so angry about the Fletchy storyline when they showed him messing up so much. And everybody who's read any of my Fletchy stories knows this. But that was, he is so intelligent and has so many skills. And to see them writing him just like be a disaster, I'm still not over it. But that was one of the things that, or one of the things that I, you know, love about his character and enjoy watching.
I want you to go back and think about what scene that made you fall in love with the character and why. Can you go back and think of that first scene that did it for you? And I'll start it off. For me, it was in Human Trafficking when he's sitting in the bar with Hetty and he's just oozing vulnerability. I mean, he's been through hell and back, and the expressions on his face and how he was dealing with Hetty was just, I just loved it. And that's what made me say, wow, this character's cool. I really like this guy. What about you guys? What was your first scene that made you feel that way?
It's Brenda. I would agree. It was that scene. I mean, that whole, that whole episode, it was so impactful. But at the end there, because it's a little bit far in the past, but I think we weren't entirely certain that he was a permanent fixture at that point, right? And I felt like that scene is where, first of all, I was like, wow, like this is a character that has so much range and depth. And also, this is somebody that might actually stick around. He might not be just like a temporary character with an arc. But yeah, that was it for me. I completely agree.
This is a hard one because there's so many scenes that are flashing through my mind early on that cemented everything for me. Human Traffic, I think by that time he'd been hired full time, but I think at the end of, I think it was Fame, which was the second episode he'd been on in, where he's going back to LAPD to go undercover, and he puts those sunglasses on, and she says, well, maybe you won't be back, he says, and he would say, yeah, I will be, and he says, it just putting on those sunglasses, and I thought, yeah, this guy is adding so much to this show with just being a SoCal guy. I mean, he just gave texture to the entire series for me. But there were so many of them after that, Human Traffic, where I realized what a great actor Eric was when he, at the end, where he confronted, I can't remember the bad guy's name, the dirty cop, but where he's yelling at him. And it was so intense and so powerful that I thought, wow, this guy is not just a pretty face. He's not just funny. He's not just handsome. He's got acting chops like nobody else. I mean, he really showed me something there. And that really locked me into, along with Personal, which is maybe my all-time favorite, where he's just heroic in that episode for me.
Yeah, you're right. There are so many. It's Brenda again. There are so many scenes. That scene on the car, I love that. And I thought that was hilarious. And just perfectly for what the show needed at that time. But the human trafficking is where you see, like, wow, this isn't just a clown character. This is someone that's going to add a lot.
For me, it was this is Karen, the final scene in Personal. I think up until that time, I wasn't maybe paying quite enough attention. And then learning more about his backstory made him instantly, for me, just more intriguing and more complex. And from that point on, he definitely had my attention.
It's Lissa. For me, I actually came on a little later than a lot of people. I started watching with a friend who was binge watching reruns of season 7, between season 7 and 8. And I think it was probably the stretch of episodes that was like Unlocked Mind, which was, I think it's really underrated as far as Deke's episodes go. It doesn't get mentioned a lot, but he is amazing in that episode. And then also in that stretch is Internal Affairs, which obviously we get a lot of his, some of the backstory there. And then even going into the stretch of Come Back, and just how he interacts with Kenzie and dealing with this whole like ex situation and how it's not an issue. Oh, and Core Values is also in there too, which is, again, kind of a minor episode, like not in the big scheme of things, but it's a very heavy Deeks and Denzi episode. And I think that stretch of episodes right there was like, ooh, okay, I like this guy. I like both of these people. And then my friend showed me Neighborhood Watch, and I was hooked. I was like, okay, now I need to watch the entire series. But I was actually like, it's that mid season 7 that, like I said, I don't hear talked about a lot, but like thinking back, it's like, no, those are actually a really good, like there are a bunch of like big Callan episodes in there too, but it's like the ones that have Denzi as a big focus, which is a large amount, like they are really strong episodes.
It's Donna. I also didn't start watching until, like, I don't know, season 6 or something, but going back, when I started watching, I finished maybe that season and then started watching from the beginning. I would say, looking back, I think it was probably The Job, when, they're in front of the screen and, it's this big jokey guy and, and now all of a sudden he's like, no, I've got you back. And you knew, he meant every word of that. And then at the end, when he punched the guy out, that's for my part. And I was like, oh, that's really sweet. Because they were flirty, but they weren't, this was his partner. This wasn't his girlfriend. This wasn't his wife. This was, you messed with my partner and here's what you're going to get now. So I think that was it for me.
This is M. I started watching after season 6 ended. And I watched them all very quickly. So I don't have like this key memory of one that, an episode or scene that stuck out to me because, like I said, I watched them so quickly together. But 3 episodes that really stuck with me and made me say, I need to keep watching. You know, I have to start watching when this airs again. Were definitely Human Traffic, Personal, and then the Descent and Ascension arc. Like Descent and I know that's a really dark couple of episodes, but I would be at work and when I had a spare moment, I'd be thinking, I have to find out what happens next. Like, so that really stuck with me. And as far as like Human Traffic and Personal, I think like some other people have said, Deke's vulnerability and just like seeing more of his values and how he deals with people, like the scene where at towards the end of Personal where he goes to save Kenzie. Like, he can barely move in bed, but he goes running across that hospital to go protect her. And then I also like the beginning of that episode when he's so happy running, like that before he gets shot, he just seems so happy in the beginning of the episode that I always enjoy that first couple minutes where he's just like enjoying himself for once.
I love the music to that first scene. It's just so Deeks. I had to go out and buy the CD of the band that played it because I just thought this whole band reminds me of Deeks. And yeah, that's a great scene. Gail, Randy?
Yeah, this is Randy. I can't remember which specific episode it was, but was the first time he called Kinsey Fern. And I'd watched NCSLA since it started, the first episode, and I'd already established Kinsey as a real tough, kick-ass person, and she didn't take any flack from anybody. She didn't take it from Callan. She didn't take it from Sam. So there wasn't that level of picking on her, pressing her buttons from the other two. And when Deeks walks in and it calls her Fern and does these things, and she doesn't know how. She could see that Kinsey did not know how to react to Deeks. She didn't know how to treat him. She didn't know how to treat him when she first met him when he was undercover in Hand to Hand, and then later the next few years she still doesn't know what he's going to do next. So when he called her Fern, it was like he found that button, and it was the button he pushed over and over and over and over and over again, and it just brought a different aspect to not only Kinsey, but then it added Deeks to the mix. So it paired them two together, and they paired so well, just like Callan and Sam had. And that was something that was missing in the Kinsey character. And then bringing Deeks in, it was just the perfect foil for her to, she abused him sometimes by the slaps and the hits and the punches sometimes, but that's because she didn't know what to do with it. She didn't know how to handle it. And it was just something, a perfect part of that rounded out the rest of the characters and the rest of the team.
This is Pat. I was probably latest to the game. I was just looking up to see when I first wrote my first story, because that's when I started watching. It was 2018. So it was the year they went to Mexico. It was between the two parts is when I started watching. And I think the first episode that I saw was that first part of that story. So Kenzie and Deeks were already established. And he was, of course, they were fighting. And yet he was terrified for her. And I had to fit the whole show in between May and September, whenever they started again. So I ended up binge watching via syndicated episodes, which were all over the place and in all crazy order. So I couldn't even say. I probably fell in love with him for his concern over Kenzie in the very first episode, but I fell in love with different aspects of him along the way. Just the teasing, the humor, the banter, the little touch of romance in there, but also the pathos of the character, and all the episodes that you guys have mentioned that are sort of a little more Deeks focused, I think, just solidified what I had seen at the very beginning. And then from then on, I've been watching.
Well, I have one final question for you guys. If you were the showrunner, what change or what would you have liked to have seen happen for Deeks in the last 13 years? I mean, for me, I think I would like to have seen a more serious Deeks, and much less of the clown, but that's because I fell in love with a very serious guy in that episode. So what about you? What would you like to have seen different, or made changes or additions to the character?
It's Donna. Oops, did I cut somebody off?
Mm-mm.
And it's funny because Randy was saying this, and I had literally had this thought like about 15 seconds before Randy started referencing the hits and the smacks and the punch. And I wish that had been addressed verbally, not necessarily the punch, but at some point, I wish he would have put up his hand when she went to, reach and smack him or whatever and go, use your words or something like that. I just wish that had been addressed. It would have been nice to have seen him standing up for himself in that respect. Didn't have to be disrespectful, didn't have to be, confrontational. She kind of stopped. I mean, occasionally she'd still kind of smack him on the side of the arm sometimes, but, especially after we learned of his history, if she couldn't take it upon herself to realize maybe I shouldn't be hitting this man, then I think I wish at some point we would have seen him say something to her about it.
This is Brenda. I totally agree. I always hated that, especially after we knew about his history. And I'm really glad when they stopped that, because it didn't add anything to Kenzie as a character for her to be lashing out like that. I mean, yes, I understand she also had a difficult past, but that just, to me, that's just across the line, and I'm glad it stopped. And I hope it's maybe some sort of an evolution of what we consider acceptable in terms of interpersonal conflict that we're gonna model in characters on TV, because that's just, I mean, like, I deal with people who are victims of domestic violence. That's not okay. Like, some of that was chargeable behavior. So I was really glad it quit. I hated it while it was ongoing, and I just felt it was such a disservice to both of them, but especially to him.
Anybody else?
I'm here. I would have liked to see him, especially in the last several seasons, have more undercover opportunities, because he's supposed to be so good at it. He is so good at it. And I feel like we didn't see a lot of those skills, and just him as a investigator, liaison, whatever, as much as the series went on. And I enjoy his humor, but as somebody else said, sometimes it was overdone, or that's all it became when he and Kinsey weren't talking about having a baby, or they're those kind of things, or kind of having small little arguments for no apparent reason. He was always kind of joking much of the time in a way that didn't seem like it carried his character forward in any way. So I would have liked to see more undercover roles, and just see more variation particularly towards the end of the series.
Kind of jumping in on that, it's Lissa again. I feel like that was definitely a missed opportunity for the show as a whole, like in the last couple seasons when we had all this separation due to COVID and everything. I think that would have been a really great opportunity to send a character off on like a long-term undercover or something, or two characters like together on a mission, and you could kind of have two different stories going on for a couple episodes instead of like just having like your case of the week, which I know would have like changed up their format, which is probably why they didn't go that route. But it would have been a way to like make the best of that crappy situation. Instead, like, we ended up, we get person A and B here and C and D here, and they never interact except for on the phone. Like, I don't think I've ever seen more phone calls between characters as I have in the last 3 seasons of TV. Like, it's just, it's hard. It's made it a lot more telling and not showing. And it's unfortunate that, I mean, it had to happen at least that first year back. But since then, it's kind of continued. And I don't know if that's been an intentional choice, because I don't know how strict everything was on their end. But I miss those interactions with everyone. And I think that's what I would have liked the most in these more recent seasons.
This is Lindy. I think being a showrunner would be the last thing I want to
Lindy, we've lost you.
Melissa just said you can send them all you can't do. You know, you've got to know how to get you back. So,
Lindy, can you repeat that because it was garbled?
okay. I wouldn't want to be the showrunner because it's the most difficult job ever, because you have all these contracts with actors and you have certain screen times that you have to allot, and you have to take into consideration all these different writers who have different ideas. And I think it's the most difficult job ever. But I agree with Lissa about the undercover stuff. I think that would have been a great way to deal with this, the COVID thing, where you couldn't have everybody together. I think that would have been great.
Okay, I think we've lost Lindy again.
But,
All right, Lindy, we've lost
being a
you.
showrunner, you know, you have a lot of power. You really unmuted you. I just unmuted. Am I back or not?
Yeah, you're back. It's been a little bit garbled on and off, but
Okay, well,
I think we got the gist of what you were saying. Anybody else before we wrap this up?
I think
This
go ahead,
Go ahead.
whoever that was.
is Pat. I was just gonna say that I wish we'd seen a little more of Deeks as a leader, and less of him as a follower, and a little bit less of him as a rebel, because I feel like every time a new head of the unit came in, he was in the target, you know, and it was always pushing back. So it was even with Kilbride and Mosley, the one before, he was always a target of them, but was always painted as something that he had brought upon himself by just not being in lockstep with the others. So I wish we had seen a little more of that. I don't mind the humor in him, and I think that could have kept on, but at some point it becomes a little bit like caricature, and that's the part that I didn't really appreciate. Dan, you mind if I throw out a question?
Yeah, sure.
My question is, can you see him with a little baby girl or a little baby boy?
Yes.
Yes. Was not a yes or no question.
Twins,
the
advanced
twins.
maternal age, you're more likely to have twins.
Yay.
For some reason, I think it's a girl, but I would love to see him raise a boy and change the story of his lineage into something new.
I don't know if you can hear me. This is Lindy, but I'm all for him having a boy, because, you know, they have Rosa, just seems like a nice rounded out family, but I would love to see him raise a boy and teach him. I still remember those scenes with his old friend. I can't remember his name now for
Right.
listening. Yeah, Ray, that, you know, it's not going to be like it was for us. And I think that would have been a nice rounded out version.
Karen, you wanted to say something? No? Anybody else? Well, this has been a lot of fun and I'm going to really miss you guys a lot. I'm hoping that all of our fanfic writers out of there, if you still want to contribute, we'll still definitely still post. And you know, if you think of anything else that you would like to write about, you're always welcome to be a part and continue with our legacy here. Thanks for all being here. Thanks for contributing. And hopefully we'll see you soon. All. Thanks again.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks,
You.
Diane.
Guys.
Thanks, Anne.
Bye.
Bye.